Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to take a look at Pluto's upcoming entrance into the sign of Aquarius, talk a little bit more about this major planetary ingress, one of the biggest events of 2023. Of course, it's going to take Pluto a couple of years to fully ingress into Aquarius, so we're going to go over the timeline of Pluto's entrance into Aquarius, what we can expect in 2023, and this will be the first of a few videos that I'd like to do on this planetary ingress. Of course, I've already done a few in the past as well. So you can certainly go back into the archives and look at some of the things I've already said and done. We've taken a look at Pluto into Aquarius in relation to the topic of aliens and UFOs. Kind of did that for fun last week. This week, I want to talk a little bit about the fact that Pluto's entrance into Aquarius has been associated with some major moments in both the industrial and scientific revolutions. Pluto into Aquarius has an association with political revolutions as well, which is really interesting. We're going to spend a little bit more time on the industrial, scientific revolutions. Not that I'm any historian or an academic historian or anything like that, but there's a few things that can be said about Pluto's historical entrances into Aquarius and times that it's spent in Aquarius in these historical periods, and what that might tell us about this upcoming Pluto in Aquarius season that we're about to experience. I want to talk about some of the beautiful the beautiful signatures of Pluto into Aquarius around things like the industrial and scientific revolutions, but also 5 things that can get marginalized when Pluto enters Aquarius and tends to amplify themes of reason and technology and enlightenment and progress and things like that. So we'll sort of cover it from both sides. What is there to like about this particular dimension of Pluto into Aquarius, and what should we be careful of? So hopefully you guys will enjoy this. Before we get into it, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe, share your comments. It helps the channel to grow. It gets the word out there about this channel to other people. I really appreciate that. You can always find transcripts of any of my daily talks on my website, which is nightlightastrology.com. If you have a story to share in the next month as Saturn enters Pisces or Pluto enters Aquarius, and we're spending a lot of time talking about these transits, please use the hashtag grabbed and leave us your story. Use the hashtag grabbed and then say Pluto into Aquarius, here's what I experienced, or Saturn into Pisces or whatever. If you prefer to email us your story, you can email it to grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. So I look forward to doing a storytelling episode after we see how these transits are affecting people in March. All right, well, let's go ahead and get into it. I want to just bring up 2 previous Pluto into Aquarius periods. The most recent period, which began in 1777, right around there, and the time before that, which takes us all the way back to about the 1530s. So I'm going to put this up onto the screen. Actually, you know what? Before we do that, let's actually take a look at the upcoming ingress. So here's 1532. You can see Pluto's just entering Aquarius in about 1532. Actually, I'll go through these first. And then if we advance this let's go by years, you can see Pluto making its way through Aquarius. And so we're looking at about 1553 until it leaves and enters Pisces. And then if we, let's put, all right, let's go to okay, here. See if I can enter March 1st, 1777. It's not giving me, okay. Sorry guys, hold on just one second. Having some troubles entering my date here. It's annoying. Okay, you know what? I'm just going to do this. Sorry, everybody, in advance. So we'll just advance this, and you can kind of see how slowly it is that Pluto actually moves through the signs. It's a very slow-moving planet. It takes like 200 plus years to work its way through the zodiac, and there's got to be a quicker way of doing this. I'm sorry. I don't know why it just won't let me enter it in manually. But anyway, so you can see it's moving along, and it's going to come back into the sign of Aquarius in the 1770s. And it's right around that time that we have the start. In the 1530s, we're landing Pluto right into some of the most important events of the scientific revolution. And here it is, Pluto's entering Aquarius And that had to have been the longest way I could have done that. I don't know why. Usually I can just type it in right up here and it'll do it, but for some reason it wasn't letting me. Anyway, so Pluto enters Aquarius. Here it is in 1778. But if you go backwards just a little bit, let's see here. So we're going to go, good Lord. All right, so you can see that Pluto's entering, this is about 1777 that it makes its first ingress, which is, right around the time of the American Revolution. Of course, this coincides pretty closely with the French Revolution as well. And so, but more broadly speaking, this Pluto into Aquarius era coincides with some of the most important events and years of the what is broadly referred to as the Industrial Revolution. So you can see Pluto going through Aquarius here, and this is all the way up until about 1797. So it's a long period of time. Now let's bring it up to the current moment, and we're going to see around March 23rd that Pluto enters Aquarius. Now it's going to go into that 0 degree space of Aquarius until about the middle of June, when it retrogrades back into the late degrees of Capricorn. So we have from late March until about the middle of June this year. Then what's going to happen is we're going to see Pluto retrograde station, turn direct, and come back into it'll come back into Aquarius again about the end of January 2024. And then what happens is it's going to spend most of 2024 bumping into those first early degrees of Aquarius. It retrogrades and it comes back out of Aquarius right about here. This is September 2nd of 2024. Then it spends a little bit of time at that 29th degree of Capricorn, just one last little hoorah, and then it finally enters Aquarius to stay late November of 2024. At which point it is then in Aquarius. You can march it through, and it's not gonna leave Aquarius all the way until about 2044. And that's just, I'm not going with exact dates here, but just to give you a feel for how long this transit is and how long the transition is that we're experiencing right now with Pluto's entrance into Aquarius over the next really about 2 years. So it's about 2 years that we get Pluto fully entering Aquarius, and then we're into this new era. The most recent eras before that, like I said, were, if you look back to about 1777, and I think the other one was like 1531 or 2, something like that. And those periods, interestingly, Pluto in Aquarius in the most recent period coincides with some of the most important events in the Industrial Revolution. Here is just a little Wikipedia excerpt on what the Industrial Revolution was, for those of you who don't know. The Industrial Revolution was the transition to new manufacturing processes in Great Britain, continental Europe, and the United States. It occurred from 1760 to about 1820 to 1840. This transition included going from hand production methods to machines, new chemical manufacturing and iron production processes, the increasing use of water power and steam power, the development of machine tools, and the rise of the mechanized factory system. Output greatly increased, and result was an unprecedented rise in population and in the rate of population growth. Textile industry was the first to use modern production methods, and textiles became the dominant industry in terms of employment, value of output, and capital invested. Anyway, it goes on and on and on, but that's just like a little taste. Now, if we go back to the period before that, like I said, it was like 1530s, if I'm remembering correctly. And let's bring it back. There we go. Pluto in Aquarius and the Scientific Revolution. Now, the Scientific Revolution is a long, again, it's like a very long period, but it is marked by, many different important events. Now, I'll read you this. Now, this Scientific Revolution is dated differently by different people, but this date has about 1543 to 1687 on Wikipedia. The Scientific Revolution was a series of events that marked the emergence of modern science during the early modern period, when developments in math, physics, astronomy, biology, including human anatomy and chemistry, transformed the views of society about nature. The Scientific Revolution took place in Europe, starting toward the second half of the Renaissance period, with the 1543, now this is while Pluto is in Aquarius, publication of Nicholas Copernicus's On the Revolutions of the Heavenly Spheres, often cited as its beginning. The era of the scientific renaissance focused to some degree on recovering the knowledge of the ancients and is considered to have culminated in the 1687 Isaac Newton publication Principia, which formulated the laws of motion and universal gravitation, although you will find that Nicholas Copernicus publication on the revolution of the heavenly spheres is also hugely important to this period, which is when Pluto was in Aquarius. So if we go down just a little bit, I'll just read you what I think is... So it's heliocentrism. For almost 5 millennia, the geocentric model of the Earth as the center of the universe had been accepted by all but a few astronomers. And it goes on to talk about that model. But Copernicus's 1543 work on the heliocentric model of the solar system tried to demonstrate that the sun was the center of the universe. Few were bothered by this suggestion, and the Pope and several archbishops were interested enough by it to want more detail. His model was later used to create the calendar of Pope Gregory. However, the idea that the Earth moved around the sun was doubted by most of Copernicus's contemporaries. It contradicted not only empirical observation due to the absence of an observable stellar parallax, but more significantly at the time, it contradicted the authority of Aristotle. This is interesting. So I won't labor those things because I'm not really qualified to talk about them very much. I studied in graduate school. I studied creative writing, so and literature and literary theory, I guess. So anyway, one of the things that broadly defines Pluto's entrance into Aquarius is the advance of technology, of reason, of the spirit of progress, both technologically and scientifically. It is a fixed air sign ruled by Saturn, and you get the idea of paradigm changes or revolutions in the way we think, in the way we model the universe, in the way that we design and construct structures of civilization. And these are, clearly so many good things come out of this era and some really problematic things. We're going to talk about some of those things that can get marginalized by the spirit of progress and reason and technology and sort of advancement of knowledge and things like that, all very Aquarian. But first, I think we need to explain why. Like, why is the sign associated with the march of reason and science and technology? And don't just say Uranus. That's in my humble opinion, it's a very lazy explanation, because all the way, even during these periods, astrologers associated the sign of Aquarius with some of these features, and not due to its modern association with the planet Uranus. So it's important to understand for thousands of years why these same things would have been associated with Aquarius for reasons other than like Uranus and the modern association or rulership of Uranus, which is interesting. And I'm not saying there aren't some interesting associations to be made there. I don't really use outer planets as sign rulers, right? That's not something that, that's like a whole different story. And if you do, that's fine too. But why is this sign associated with the march of progress, both scientifically and technologically and so forth? Well, again, you have to think about the fact that ancient astrologers, very similar to our like sort of like Taoist contemporaries who were developing the I Ching, looked at the primary symbols of the whole language of astrology, the sun and the moon, as a kind of yin and yang pairing that repeats itself and is elaborated at every level of the astrological language and theory. So the signs of the zodiac, some of the reasons that they get their planetary associations, like why is Saturn associated with Capricorn or Aquarius or whatever, it has to do with the archetypes of the planet as they are associated with a seasonal quality that is defined not so much by the weather or by winter or something like that in, say, the sign of Aquarius, which comes during the Northern Hemisphere's winter, but by the quality of light and the juxtaposition of light and dark that is present at every different stage of the solar year, as it's seen and experienced from Earth in the Northern Hemisphere symbolically. Symbolically meaning not literally and causally. So what is happening during Aquarius season? Well, the light has started to return from within the dark dominant side of the year. So from, say, Libra all the way through Pisces. You're on the dark half of the year, which means that dark is dominant. However, from Capricorn through Pisces, light is emerging from within the darkness. And you often get that story of light emerging from within the darkness, whether it's, in Capricorn or Aquarius or Pisces, as a kind of attraction, an archetypal attraction to progress. Because one of the ways that can be understood, the emergence of light from within darkness, is the gradual enlightenment, whether it's spiritual or technological or scientific or whatever, that there's a gradual move from like ignorance or something that's like less evolved or sort of primitive to something more enlightened and something more advanced. And that is one of the ways that all three of those winter signs that have the light emerging from within the darkness can be understood. You get it a little bit more emotional, romantic, and mystical quality of that emergence of light from in the darkness in Pisces, for example. You get something very earthy in Capricorn, a lot of like building of very earthy structures, and kind of building it with the stuff of the earth. In Aquarius, an air sign that comes in the middle, it's really ideological and it's really mental. The development of light from within the darkness is something that comes through principles, through reason, through ideas, and through the progress from error to truth that defines in many ways the spirit of science and technology and things like that. But it's present not only in the arenas of the mind. It's also the same sense of ideological progress or like philosophical progress is also present. For example, one of the things that happens when Pluto is in Aquarius is that you have the important events in the Reformation happening, where the Church of England is splitting off from the Catholic Church, or you have political expressions through the French and American revolutions. But what's guiding it is a sense of an idea that is supplanting an old idea about how things work or how things should work in society. It's like I can't. Every time I say that word, I want to go society. And someone has rightly pointed out that you'll hear me like I'm like about to say the word society. I'm like, I gotta find a different word because it would kill the mood if I suddenly and it's like always on the tip of my tongue. Someone rightly pointed out that I actually took that that like society, man, that well, there's two movies that really inspired that. One was Empire Records, which is anyway, if you've seen Empire Records, and then the other one is Into the Wild, where the main character actually says that. It's super funny. So anyway, but there are in the Pluto in Aquarius, the Pluto in Aquarius archetype is about, remember, Pluto as regenerative, as deeply transformative over long periods of time, of bringing up unconscious material to be processed and seen, and also for the unconscious to be moving and transforming things in ways that are both positive and sometimes destructive. And so that's just a, sort of an undertreatment of Pluto. But we've said so much about Pluto on this channel so many times that I don't want to make this about Pluto as much as I want to make it about the expression of Pluto in Aquarius. Anyway, so much of this of what Aquarius is about is light emerging from darkness, but in an area that has to do with the fixity of air, which is like mind. So you're talking about ideas that have been entrenched that will be overthrown, or the old structure versus the new structure. And there's like a clash between tradition and innovation, as well as between innovation and the spirit of progress, and also the potential for hubris, right? For getting high on progress to the point where other things can get marginalized. The age of reason can, ironically, for as light and solar as it may seem, it can be it can be suppressive of other things. Like, oh, we're moving from error to truth, but in the meantime, we're devastating other peoples and other things. So the potential for dogma that is suppressive and like oppressive to grow stronger during such a period, masked or cloaked in the appearance of enlightenment, of reason, of progress, is a very real. It's a likelihood. It's not just a possibility. It's likely to happen when Pluto goes into Aquarius, and we will benefit from the spirit of progress. Democracy, for example, I would argue is one of the better, not perfect, but better things that we've experimented with, and that's came about in many respects, comes about during Pluto and Aquarius periods. But there are things that can get squashed along the way. So going back to the seasonal quality of light and dark, you also have to remember that this is a Saturn-ruled sign, and Saturn was the planet associated with oppositions. And Saturn, by its nature, is not, people always get this wrong. People will say Saturn is the limit. No, Saturn is not the limit. Saturn is the boundary marker that serves as a juxtaposition point between the limited and the limitless. Or it serves as like a gatekeeper between things that have strong polarized tension, the wisdom of the past versus the wisdom of the future, the real thing versus the phony thing, the illusion versus the real thing, the deceptive thing versus the truthful thing. And wherever there are like hard divisions between two things, Saturn is like the sort of like the boundary keeper between them, and constellates their duality. And that does not mean that Saturn is the planet of duality and therefore bad, because for ancient mystics, the grappling with duality is as basic to mystical experience or gnosis as is the contemplation of the symbol of the opposing yin and yang figures. So you can't make Saturn into a bad guy. It's really not a good idea. Any planet can act, can signify things that are difficult or painful. But whenever someone starts to define Saturn as a bad, limiting, negative figure, what they're doing is they're falling into the trap of reading Saturn in terms of one side of a duality that Saturn constellates. So, for example, when you pit the young person against the old person, and you see like, oh, these younger millennials, they don't get it, or the baby boomers, they're so stuck in the past, and as soon as that juxtaposition itself tends to be Saturnine. But also the working of the tension of those opposites that leads to greater wisdom and understanding is also Saturnine. So you have to understand that Saturn is a planet of wisdom, and Saturn is a planet of wisdom that is forged in the fire of the tension of opposites. Now, a lot of us, when we collapse into one side of a duality, will be experiencing something that is also Saturnine. I mean, that's a sort of Saturnian affliction, is to fall into one side of the duality or the other. But that doesn't mean that that's what Saturn is. It would be like saying that Mars is only a hot poker in your side, when Mars is also the determination that you need to let your muscle burn all the way through the repetitions at the gym in order to get stronger. So it's just an encouragement not to think of Saturn, not to fall into the trap of thinking about Saturn only through a dualistic perspective, when working dualities is part of what leads to wisdom. And that's also Saturnine, if that makes sense. Now, why do I say all of that? Because one of the great challenges of Saturn, of the Saturn-ruled air sign, is the way in which very strong mental, ideological opposites or dualities will present themselves, and they will be at the center of the tension that provokes this story of progress For example, one of the things that is at the heart of the Reformation is the question about whether anyone needs an intermediary to talk to God. Do I need a pope? Do I need a priest? Or are we are the lay people the clergy? Like, are we each ourselves, do we each have direct connection to God? And in a sense, like, you could say that I'm just kind of simplifying things, but part of the whole struggle of the Protestant Reformation and the Catholic Church and that duality is like, you need a lineage of traditional authority. No, it's just between you and God. And it's sort of like that you split along party lines. But what we found over the years, right, as for example, one of my favorite communities of Christian mystics are the Taze community, which I think is in France, and they are like an sort of ecumenical community of both Protestant and Catholic monks, so to speak, or clergy. And one of the things that they've demonstrated over time is that some appeal to, like, it's sort of like saying that the connection to God through the individual alone is a valid and sacred path. But so too is the path of a guru who somehow acts as intermediary, or a priest, and that they don't have to be pitted against one another like one is true and one is false. But if you hold the tension as not so much a problem to be solved as just a reality that exists, a tension that we all work through our lives. Sometimes we need higher authority to help us connect with God. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's a direct experience. Don't be tempted into polarizing the two, because that's when you suffer the afflictions of Saturn. So similarly, in any period where there is tremendous spirit of revolution and progress and innovation, usually something is getting marginalized. Something will end up falling into the shadows, or something will be left out or forgotten, because there's a real heroic sense, it has such a bright light behind it. I mean, think about how excited people must have been for the steam engine, and for, factories to do things, and for, like, all that progress of the Industrial Revolution, the scientific revolution, the enthusiasm that we're outplacing an old, erred, like, ignorant model for something, so much truer, or so much more beneficial for all people, or something like that. There can be a way in which the spirit of progress can end up clouding other things. So I want to talk about, as Pluto is entering Aquarius, and we are likely to see in the next 20 years of our lives some really big leaps in technology, in probably in not only technology, but in science, in our understanding of the universe, in our understanding of the human body and mind, in our understanding of genes, and in so many different areas. Maybe our understanding of alien or extraterrestrial life forms, or maybe interdimensional beings, or maybe maybe there'll be breakthroughs in terms of psychedelic medicine. I mean, so many things that could truly be really exciting. Progress politically or socially. However, there are things that can get marginalized in the process. These are the Saturnine dualities, that wherever there is, like, okay, well, we're not going to be under the thumb of that old paradigm anymore. We've found the new one. We can get, what's that? Conversion fever, when you get converted to something, when something new comes along, you get so excited about it that you can develop like a tendency to judge or condemn anything that doesn't fall in line with the new thing, even if the new thing is like virtuous. Like, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to find, like, you can find things that are really beautiful. Like, I remember, finding ayahuasca, finding yoga, finding, anything new that's really beneficial. And it's weird how that beneficial thing can turn into the it can provide you with an opportunity to judge or condemn other people or things. It's kind of weird how that works. Anyway, okay, I'm rambling. So the 5 things that can get marginalized with this march of progress. One is natural wisdom. One of the downsides of the Industrial Revolution and the Scientific Revolution, in the sort of general airiness of the Pluto and Aquarius season, is that we can lose touch with the wisdom of nature, with the wisdom of the body, with embodied feminine, earthy wisdom. For example, one of the things that happens is that we will see, if there's a rise in, artificial intelligence, or if there is a rise in, like one of the unfortunate things that happens, and I'm going to talk about this later, is that we can forget that we live in an enchanted cosmos, because the more empirical and scientific that things become, sometimes we forget that we live on an earth, and the earth is sentient and that it's alive. So natural wisdom can be marginalized. And the natural wisdom could be the wisdom of the body, of the instinctual body. So Aquarius can be a little dissociative, and it can live in the realm of ideas. One natural consequence of that is that we forget the wisdom of nature. Now, what comes along with that is the wisdom of the past, of ancient wisdom. For example, one of the things that I mentioned this in an episode earlier this week, where I talked with my friend, astrologer Sean Nygaard, and we talked about, there was, when I was getting into psychedelics and was really interested in the science of mind and science in the scientific exploration of consciousness and entheogens and things like that, that there were a number of people in the psychedelic community, including Terence McKenna, some strong Aquarian signatures in their birth charts. And they were interested in something called the archaic revival, which is to say, okay, yeah, as much as we are progressing in things like, industry and science and so forth, let's not, in some of these things, what happens as a result is we forget the wisdom of the past, of primitive or ancient peoples. I mean, primitive isn't the right word, of ancient peoples and of indigenous wisdom, that we're looking for a, we're so interested in the idea that like time is naturally bringing us from a more primitive, less evolved, ignorant state to a more enlightened and evolved state, that we forget that it doesn't always work that way, or at least many things it could sometimes be the opposite, where the real paradigm shattering shift would be to return to some of the earthy, nature-based, feminine, and indigenous wisdom of the past. I'll never forget when I was in the Amazon drinking ayahuasca, and I thought, this kind of wisdom, that the wisdom of these plants in my body, and the wisdom of this curandero who's singing these magical icaros, whistling them and shaking a leaf rattle, and I can hear the sounds of the jungle. This is wisdom, and this wisdom is, it doesn't have to be, again, like setting up a duality. Like, it doesn't have to be that it is completely contrary to, it's like, well, either we all move into the forest and start drinking psychedelics, or we build skyscrapers, and it's just like one or the other. It doesn't have to be like that, but remember that one of the things that tends to get sort of suppressed when the airy spirit of progress and development and revolution is at a fever pitch is going to be ancient, earthy, feminine, indigenous, and older forms of wisdom that in some ways are being marginalized because we're obsessing about future and progress. Okay, so that should make sense. Number 3 is relational wisdom. There is a wisdom that is not rooted in mind, but is rooted in heart-to-heart subjective experiences between living beings. So insofar as we look at the world and we think of it objectively, and we think of it mechanistically, how does it work? How can I get it to work? How can I manipulate energies and forces to accomplish tasks or something like that? In some ways, it's a very impersonal and ironically inhuman way of looking at things. And that is one of the shadows of Pluto and Aquarius, I believe, is that it can be a little inhuman and impersonal. but it will always mask its brightest and most beautiful ideas in the guise of humanitarianism or of social progress and things like that. And to a certain extent, it's because a lot of the ideas that Pluto and Aquarius brings about, or that the sign of Aquarius in general brings about, will be progressive. They will be helpful. But one of the things that can be kind of cut out of that picture is that some of the most important wisdom, how we know things, what we know, what truths should guide our decisions, should guide our civilizations and our families, and and our communities and our cultures, are rooted in heart to heart, being to being, body to body exchanges. That we think of life not so much as a system to be understood, analyzed, taken apart, manipulated, but that we understand it as a living web of beings whose relationships with one another are primary. We have to keep that in mind with Pluto in Aquarius. Number 4 is romantic wisdom. Pluto in Aquarius can fall in love with big ideas that can have truly, like progressive impact. However, one of the things that can easily be marginalized is beauty. Beauty, aesthetics, sensuality, and the romantic lens. It's not surprising that sort of the Industrial Revolution period leads into the Romantic period, which I'm very familiar with from my background in literary theory and literary history and stuff like that. But the Romantic period is like there will be a need for a kind of romantic response, or there could be like romantic backlash to what feels like an increasingly cerebral energy. And so these are things that I think if we keep in mind as we go, there's no reason that we need to fall into the trap of these things being marginalized or totally cut off while Pluto's in Aquarius. How can we think of new ideas, new structures, new paradigms of thought, new technologies that are useful, truly helpful, truly enlightening, while also not lacking in connection to the earth, to the body, to ancient wisdom, to feminine wisdom, to relational wisdom, to romantic wisdom? And then 5, unfortunately, when especially you have one of the things that happens with the scientific enlightenment period, or the scientific revolution, is that gradually an astrological enchanted cosmos that speaks, that is divinatory, where the stars can speak as omens, and we live in an enchanted cosmos where synchronicity is an everyday part of life, that this kind of cosmos can easily be forgotten. We can move into something that's too mechanistic, and our understanding of reality and the universe itself, how useful is it if it doesn't allow us to connect to the living intelligence of the universe? The living intelligence of the universe speaks in omens and signs. It speaks to us in dreams. It orders things meaningfully through patterns and archetypal fields of experience. I would love to see that kind of wisdom be the definition of what progress actually looks like. But I fear that there's a very good chance, although astrology never dies out, and I'm not afraid of it dying out, there's a very good chance that it gets suppressed a little bit during this period, as much as I think it would be possible that we could see it, explode in relevance. One of the reasons that it could explode in relevance is because you never know how a new generation and a new period in history is going to define progress. It is very possible that progress is defined as, in this period, as a return to some ancient wisdom that informs the way we look at culture and the way that we look at science and technology, which would be awesome. I think you also have to prepare yourself for at least the possibility that this could be a period of time that naturally suppresses the kind of magical universe that astrology astrology presents us with. So we have, when the scientific revolution comes about, gradually astrology is forced out of universities. Of course, I would say that in some ways, the study of astrology, even historically, as a way that humans have had of relating things like science, math, music, religion together should be studied by everyone, regardless of if you practice it or not, because most people aren't even aware of the fact that a huge amount of our cultural heritage is astrological in nature, from our calendars and timekeeping and holidays and and also just the sense of everybody lives with a sense. I mean, even in my sports world, I hear podcasters talking about destiny and karma all the time. They take it seriously. I mean, if you put their feet to the fire and ask them to say whether they really believe it or not, they'll like, oh, I'm just talking, But in the fantasy of their lives, when they're in the midst of following their sports teams, they believe in fate, they believe in destiny, and they can't, most people do. That's why astrology remains popular, is because no matter what we do, we cannot take away the feeling, because it's built into reality itself. By the way, you can't take away the feeling that life has a meaningful way of presenting events. We call it fate, we call it destiny, and astrology has always, it remains around because no one can get rid of the feeling that they have a fate, that they have a destiny, that their choices interact mysteriously with that. Well, I'd love to see this as a period that amplifies our ability to talk about, these kinds of things. We need a different epistemology, which is a way of understanding how we know what we know. I think the greatest promise of Pluto and Aquarius, from my point of view, my greatest hope would be that, divination as a way of knowing would be explored. Synchronicity as a way of experiencing would be talked about a little bit more. It doesn't have to be defined. It doesn't have to become an authoritative institution or something. But to rise in collective acceptance of the realities of fate, destiny, synchronicity, that dreams speak, that the unconscious is real, the soul, these things coming into our awareness a little bit more would truly be revolutionary. So I hold that as a great hope. At the same time, I wouldn't be surprised to see, AI bots taking over everything, or just things becoming sort of increasingly mechanized and impersonal, and that we'll need to make sure that we keep it soulful and keep ourselves in an enchanted universe. Anyway, okay, so this was kind of a sprawling talk today, but I hope that you got something good out of it. I would love to hear your thoughts, so don't forget to leave your comments in the comment section, like and subscribe if you haven't already. Really appreciate it. You can always find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, nightlightastrology.com. We'll be talking more about Pluto into Aquarius as it comes closer to its entrance, and also Saturn into Pisces, which are another big transit coming up in this huge month of March. So hope you guys have had a great week, and we will talk to you again soon. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.